Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Pramath. Thank you so much for joining us. Just give us a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people to join and then we'll start. As always, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll take questions as we go along. We are in the last week of enrolling for the Harappa School of Leadership's Accelerated Management Program. We hope to see some of you there eventually. Any questions or anything else that you may have about the program, we'll also keep putting the information out. But just give us a few more minutes and we'll begin. Thank you. Okay. Pramath, is that an early meal?
You don't give me time to eat.
I'm so sorry. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a very interesting topic and I think something that we all always want to know more about. What is it that really what is it that employers are really looking for when they are hiring people? And this could be at various stages in your career, when you're an early, joining the workforce early in life, when you're a mid-career professional, etc. So we're going to be speaking with Pramath and we're going to talk about this. If you have any questions, as we suggested, please feel free to put them in the Q&A chat. It's right there at the bottom. We'll be happy to answer all questions as we go along. So Pramath, is there really a silver bullet, something that, some marker or something that employers look at when they start scanning candidates for a job? Is there anything that you've sort of seen in your tenure? Things that always stand out?
Sure. I think there are some common elements, and recently on one of these knock videos that you all have done on me, I answered this in a cute way, but half serious way, to say employers look for people who are interesting and people who are also interesting and interested. Now, it sounds like a cute answer and a good one-liner, but there's some seriousness behind it. And let me tell you what it is. On the interesting part, I've usually seen people look for 4 things. One is your ability to solve problems. Ultimately, what do you do at work? What do you employers want? They want you to be somebody who will take a problem that the company is facing, the organization is facing, big or small, or a new opportunity that the company has, and would like you to solve the problem or capture the opportunity. And so they need to make an assessment whether you are capable of doing that, capable of taking on problems that might come in the future, because you don't know, there may be a problem today, but you're not hired for today's problem, you're hired for possible problems in the future or possible opportunities in the future. So that's where they may look for domain skills, they may look for past experience in similar areas. But if those are not present, then they might say, does this person have just generalist, analytical, critical thinking, problem-solving skills that they will be able to bring to a problem, even if they are unfamiliar with the sector or the function or the area. So that's the first piece in the interesting. Is this a person a good analytical thinker and problem solver? In addition to that, people look for how well is this person able to communicate? And how well are they able to work with others? So that's point number 2 and 3 under interesting. And those two are essential because in today's day and age, this is a cliche that you can't work in isolation. You need the support of others. You need to interface with clients. You need to sell something. You need to get people aligned around your idea. You need to resolve differences. You need to inspire people. You need to build teams and so on and so forth. So how good are your communication skills and how good are you in terms of relating to people, managing people? Are you the kind of person I would love to have on your team or somebody I'd love to work under? So these are sort of the 3 essential skills under the interesting bucket. And then there's a last one, which has to do with what are the attitudes and values of this person? And that's a little bit more nebulous, but it's very important. People are looking for, is this somebody who comes from a position of being proactive and hungry and has drive, ambition, or is this somebody who's smug and entitled? Is this somebody who has good values in terms of, commitment and accountability, takes things seriously, has an eye for detail? Or is this somebody who is lackadaisical, low energy, right? So these are personal values, which are attitude, integrity, energy, drive, aspiration related. So these 4 elements are very much there in every assessment form that you look at. They may be labeled differently, they may be categorized differently, there may be 6 such categories made out of these 4, or it could be 2, but these are what people look for when they try to assess somebody. Now, the how interested are you, is the part which often interviewers or job applicants miss out on. Is, are they really enthusiastic and excited about the opportunity you're offering them? Do they really want to work in your company? And somewhere you have to manifest that too, to the employer. Quite so often, there was interestingly a situation recently where a former employee of mine wanted very much to come and work at Harappa. And I got her interviewed, and unfortunately, our interviewer came back with the comment that she really doesn't know what we do. She hasn't done much research. I couldn't get a sense from the interview that she was really that interested, even though she wrote to you, Pramath, and I didn't get that feeling. Now, I'm not sure what happened in that interview, but that was a big factor in her not getting the job, because she was not able to convince our recruiter, despite my recommendation and my support for her, that she was sufficiently informed, educated, had done her homework, and was able to express that in the meeting. So we often don't realize, but that aspect is almost a make or break sometimes, right? Even with the best qualifications and assessment on are you interesting part, if you don't show enough interest and if you're not interested in the company or the role, you tend to give the signal that, yeah, I kind of applied for it because it showed up on my LinkedIn and I just wanted to check it out, or I'm just exploring. Then you lose the chance to engage with an employer. So that's how I would see, those are the things I would see as common to any job opening or any interview process.
But Pramath, interestingly, you say that, we want people who are problem solvers. Now, if you're really starting out in your career, how do you get noticed, or how do you tell someone that I can solve your problems? I mean, how do you convey that? Or how do you show that?
In many ways, Seema, I often used to talk about the fact that here are some examples. So I would talk about something that I did in school, or most people are looking for jobs after college. One has worked on research projects. One has worked on some experiments. One has worked in summer jobs, in internships. So you give illustrations of how you were presented a particular problem which was complex, and you tried to solve it. So for example, and you have to obviously make a compelling case for it. So for example, if you look at me when I was graduating from IIT Kanpur, I desperately wanted a software job, but I was a metallurgical engineer. But I had done one programming course, and for my BTech project, I'd done a lot of programming. So I made the case that, listen, I did a programming course, I got an A in it, these are the languages I learned. And by the way, based on that, for my BTech project, I took on a project, even though I was a metallurgical engineer in computer science, and worked in a very interdisciplinary field where I had to write 1,000 lines of code, which in those days was a big thing about 40 years ago. And therefore, I have the ability to analyze complex problems, multidisciplinary problems, and I worked on it. Now, a recruiter will say, yeah, this guy's talking big about this one project he did, but they also understand that you're just out of school. And so they give you slack for that. And they say, yeah, of course, I don't expect him to have done 50 things. This guy's never worked. Or I talk about the fact that, hey, did my summer training in Bokaro steel plant. And one of the projects I was asked to work on was how to improve the productivity of the coke oven battery. And I worked on this problem, even though this was very old technology provided by the Russians, and was able to make some good recommendations about how to solve that the plant eventually implemented. Or you could talk about a classroom project that you did with a bunch of your classmates to maybe come up with, new technology or new engineering solution for solving some problem on campus or in a lab. So you can give examples from your studies, basically. And even if you're a humanities or social science major, you may have analyzed a problem or done a research or written a paper. Or if you're a management student, you would have worked on a case. So you just have to think about what you've done that you're proud of and make a case for it. But this is related to your studies. But you could also talk about your extracurricular activities. So I would often talk about the fact that when I was in college, there was the 25th year of IIT Kanpur. It was the Silver Jubilee year. It was a very special year. And I was the festival secretary for the cultural festival. And I was very proud of the fact that I brought a celebrity to campus. At that time, Pankaj Udhas, who's now a very famous ghazal singer, was just up and coming. And it was a big thing for him to be able to be attracted to campus. And I made a case for how I contacted him in Mumbai as a young student, convinced him to come, negotiated his fee down, but still had to raise money for it, raised it with some Kanpur businessmen. And so I was very proud of it. And I said, listen, that was an event, that was a huge success. And I was able to solve that problem, even though it's not related to my engineering skills. And thirdly, I would often give examples of my personal experiences growing up, where I would give examples of how my father would always give me errands to do, even as a kid, and often ask me to solve some tough problems, like go and negotiate with a vendor for paper that he wanted to buy for his printing press, or not being happy with something that had been delivered would tell me to take it back and exchange it or ask for the money back, which for a young kid like me was a big complex problem to solve, because I had to negotiate and do some unpleasant conversations with people who are much older. And so that had built in me the ability to deal with these types of situations. So you draw upon your life's experiences across fields, whether it's your studies, whether it's your college experience, whether it is your research, writing, projects, internships, as well as your extracurricular experience, as well as your personal experience, to make a compelling case. Now, this does mean that you have to spend some time thinking about what you might say in an interview, and be prepared with these examples and a little bit of a storytelling around these examples so that they convey what you want them to convey. And that's what people need to do before going through a process like that.
You don't seem to have any questions coming in today, Pramath. We'd love to hear questions from all of you. Otherwise, Pramath is going to answer only all the questions that I need answered on how to get employed. But we're here for you. So, Pramath, one question that you always ask in an interview, and why?
Tell me about yourself.
Tell me about yourself. And what is the answer you're looking for from that person?
I'm looking for an answer that the person is able to give about themselves in a way that does not follow a regurgitation of their resume, a repeat of what's in their resume, but gives them a chance to tell me something about themselves that's not on the resume. Also gives them a chance to highlight how they see themselves. What are the things about themselves that they are really attractive, that are really attractive, and that they think are unique and distinctive and different, as that make them attractive to me. It's a leading question, but if you crack this question, you got me, right? I don't need to interview you. In fact, the rest of the interview can be about only those three things that you highlight in the answer to the question, tell me about yourself. Unfortunately, most people tend to just go through the chronological order and talk about their resume, which I already know. So it becomes it actually lowers the energy of the interview, because you're almost insulting me like I don't know what you've done, right? And you lose the chance to really impress me. Again, this is one of those things I talked about in one of my knock knocks. And that, how do you create a narrative about yourself and answer that question? And that answer is really about, hey, if you ask me, I'm about A, B, C. And of course, you know about my education and experience and my languages I know and the tools I know and my interests. But I really stand for somebody who loves to solve complex problems. I think I'm good at working with people. And honestly, I'm very, very committed to whatever I do. Let me tell you why.
So, Pramath, is that one of the reasons why, when we were putting AMP together, or the Accelerated Management Program together, you were very keen that, the career service or the career office makes sure that everyone gets to understand and gets a way to tell their story?
Absolutely. This is when people say storytelling or narrative or making a case for yourself and answering this question, tell me about yourself, which is, as I said, a loaded question. Most people haven't thought about it the way I just described it. And it's not easy to do that, because I think you do need help telling your own story. You've never looked at it from that lens. You've never been pushed to do that. So having a thought partner in crafting that story, almost having a mirror, or somebody look at you from the outside and say, here's what Seema you're really about, or here's what Pramath you're really about, is very powerful. And that's one of the value, as you know, Seema, that a lot of folks in our cohort have found. often people come to us saying, oh, but I'm only a software engineer, or I'm a boring construction guy. You don't get a chance to say, how does all this actually translate into the world that is beyond software, beyond construction? Only somebody else can look at that and say, of course, you can do the same kind of problem solving that you do in programming, or in construction. You must have had to deal with lots of different vendors, engineers, workers, and you probably have great communication and leadership skills to be able to get structures built. So think about highlighting that, which you can't really write in your resume. You'll talk about all the construction projects you've done, but you won't be able to say, hey, during all these construction projects, realize that I had to do a lot of project management, working with different stakeholders, getting them aligned, completing projects on time. And by the way, I can take those skills and apply it to any environment.
Okay, Pramath, so now we finally started getting questions, and you don't have to answer all my questions. But here we have something from Anuj, and Anuj wants to know what is the best way to prepare for a competency-based interview. So maybe an organization has put out a competency list and you need to sort of prepare when you go there. What should you be doing?
I think you have to take competency by competency and see what have you done, what evidence can you bring on that particular competency of what you've done in your life before. You also want to see, if they've listed 3-4 competencies, which ones are you really strong at and which ones you're not, and highlight the ones that you're strong at. They may have written competencies in a certain order. You want to change the order in your favor and highlight the ones that you're very strong at. You want to almost fill up the time in the interview talking about those strengths so that you don't give them a chance to focus on the gaps or the weaknesses, if you will. You want to have very compelling examples that back your claim on the competencies that are your strengths, so that people go, wow, this guy is really good. And you compensate with that one competency, even if you don't meet any of the other competency bars, because you make such a convincing case on just 1 or 2 competencies that you merely need to check the box on the others. So again, if you have the competencies, then just like I was saying, giving you the example of problem solving, you asked me the question on, hey, if you don't have experience, how do you show problem solving? It required some thinking to go back and say, okay, what in my life would give an example of problem solving, including the story of my father asking me to go solve problems for him as a teenager, even though it didn't relate to education or work, but it was something personal. So yeah, I think you have to create a story around each competency. First, you create an assessment, a self-assessment, or assessment based on a colleague or a mentor or a teacher who's able to tell you, and then compile evidence against each of them and pick up. And once you picked up the incident, do a little bit of a story around that so that it comes across as an engaging example. People love examples. People love your stories. So I'm not saying you exaggerate, but it's good to embellish and to talk about a little bit of the situation, the challenge, and how you overcame the challenge, or that you had unique competencies to be able to come up with something that was unique or different. So that's how you prepare. Does that answer the question?
I said you're giving away frameworks now.
Oh, I'm giving away frameworks? Well, I hope this will be a teaser for people wanting to join our program.
All right. We have Anirudh, who says, as someone who has global experience, how does one get an employer to value that as equal to having domestic experience? He's added a question to that saying, how can AMP help someone who has the global experience get a foot through the door?
Again, Seema, I think you have to take that global experience and talk about two or three things. I think you want to talk about that intrinsic experience, whether it is global or not, to highlight the ability to solve problems regardless of whether you are in India or outside. Because the inherent complexity, ambiguity, challenge of solving problems, whether you do it in India or abroad, is experience that is relevant. People might say, well, because you've always been abroad, you don't understand the local context, that you will be, like a fish out of water, that, India is different and your global experience doesn't matter here. I think you have to accept that people will say that, and then be able to make the case that I understand that there's a gap and that I may not be that familiar, but hey, I grew up in India. Go back to the time when you were here and tell them how deeply rooted you were, that you were a salt of the earth guy. I often used to tell people that, hey, I grew up in Patna, I studied in Kanpur, even though I've been away for 12 years and things may have changed. At the end of the day, I'm still the Patna boy, and I can go back and do things that are salt of the earth and on the ground, and nobody can take that out of me. You just have to have the conversation in that mode. At the same time, you want to say that, listen, you are absolutely right that I haven't really worked in India, but I'm so conscious of it that you know what, I'm going to make an extra effort to understand the Indian environment better and adapt to it. And I can assure you that I'm here to stay and that I'm willing to make the extra effort and willing to be mentored and coached by you and your team to be able to do this. And the last thing that I might add is to say, listen, and my global experience can only help. It can't hurt. I think I can bring in experiences, benchmarks, networks that your team members might find helpful as well. And I think I have something to add and to offer. So again, AMP will not solve for the gap, but AMP will help you articulate this in the way that I just did. And of course, AMP will also familiarize you with India. So it's a good initiation back into India. It's a soft landing. You'll work and interact a lot with colleagues in the class who are from India and don't have global experience, and you learn a lot from them about the reality on the ground. You'll build a support system in case your global experience has not prepared you for the realities of India. And all your faculty are people who are very much from India, have worked here. In fact, one of the distinguishing features of our program is that we have a lot of practitioners who have worked in India and, by the way, worked abroad, teaching on this program. And so they bring a lot of these capabilities, that flavor and that learning. So all in all, I think having the right narrative to accept that people are going to have this skepticism, and how do you bridge that gap, as well as if you're talking specifically about AMP, the fact that you are actually making a commitment to a program in India with Indian students and Indian faculty will obviously help you strengthen that narrative.
I'm going to take a question from Vinay Kumar, who's, I think, joined us on LinkedIn Live. He wants to know, can you give one or two powerful tips that can help someone to prepare for an interview?
One tip I have is write down 5 or 6 questions. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work in this industry? Why do you want to work in my company? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do you think are your biggest achievements? What do you think are your biggest failures? 7 questions. Think about writing the answers to these questions. And in writing the answers to these questions, think about a structure, which is what we teach, which is the pyramid structure, where you actually have a structured answer giving 3 reasons why your answer is what it is. Or when you're talking about strengths, talk about 3 strengths. And for each of those reasons, give concrete examples. Don't just say, I'm good. Don't just say, what are you good at? Be specific. And for that, give specific examples. So I gave the example of problem solving to Seema, and I said that I'm good at complex problem solving. I love interdisciplinary complex problems that are ambiguous, challenging. And here's an example. So when I was doing my PhD, or when I was working in my last job, I was presented with this situation. Here's how I went about solving it. And you will notice from this that I brought in a multidisciplinary perspective. I was able to align multiple stakeholders and come up with a solution that was unique. So giving examples makes your claims come alive. That's the most powerful tip I can give you. Preparation, anticipation of questions, writing down the answers, and not just, again, memorizing it to just regurgitate or repeat from memory, but remembering the examples and the logic. What will happen is that then whatever questions are indeed asked, you'll be able to combine all of this content in some way to answer those questions in a compelling way, even if the question is not asked the way that you wrote it down, because somewhere you've got all this content in your head. Now, you asked 2 ways, I think, or two tips. The other tip is on the functional, technical side. Any interview, people will ask you technical questions about your field, about your expertise, about your industry, about your company. And I think it's very important to brush up whatever you think might be asked, and do some tests, and again, anticipate the questions, and prepare. I think preparation is key. If you can add a 3rd thing, if you can, please do mock interviews.
Yeah, we do lots of mock interviews in AMP. I think we have like a whole set of stuff that happens. Okay, Pramath, lots of questions. So I think we'll go a little fast now. Parul Bhatt wants to know, what are the red flags you see while rejecting a candidate during interviews? I think Pramath never rejects anyone, but Pramath, tell us what are the red flags that make you think that you're not likely to work with this person?
The first red flag, which I love my characterization of, which I came up with a while ago, is when people are self-impressed. They are full of themselves. They think they're God's gift to mankind. They blow their trumpet. They overstate their achievements, their roles in things. They are flaky. You ask them the next level question: why are you saying this? Help me understand why you are great. What did you do in that situation? You suddenly realize that they're just making things up and making themselves sound much more than they actually are. So I think that's a huge red flag. You can be really smart. You can be walking on water. But as far as I'm concerned, if you're overstating and trying to impress me beyond what you've actually done, you're not being authentic, that's a huge red flag. I think bad-mouthing employers, huge red flag. You can say that you had a problem. You can say that, listen, things didn't work out. But saying that place was shitty, they were all really bad people, I had a bad boss, not a good idea. At least if it's not a red flag, it kind of sets you thinking, what will this person say about you? It's the natural reaction. People not being prepared is a red flag. You not knowing about your company, not knowing about you. Even if they know they are meeting you, they're not done any research on you. They're completely clueless. It just seems callous and irresponsible. So that's a red flag. Showing up late without reason, being poorly dressed and groomed, I think that's a big red flag for me. I'm a bit old-fashioned, and I want to see you treat an interview with seriousness. In the old days, I would take exception to people having stubbles, but I know things have changed. So I've also grown up and evolved. But, at least wear a clean shirt, or wear if you like, wear formal clothes. Show some seriousness. I think that's all I'm looking for.
And that's what most employers are likely to look for as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm no exception. And honestly, Seema, you in these situations, the employer is not really an employer. It is Seema Chaudhary or Pramath Sinha who are representing the employer, and you're dealing with their biases. So if you really are serious, forget about what your preferences are. You can't anticipate the other person's preferences. So you might as well trim your hair and shower and get a shave and wear clean clothes and put on some deodorant and not show up huffing and puffing at the last minute, and polish your shoes and just be well groomed.
I'm going to take this question from somebody called Sunny. They put in lots of questions, but I think I'll just pick up this one because this is specific to the example you gave. And maybe this is someone who knows you. It says, Pramath, considering you were aware of the recommended candidate, do you think you or your team could have given her a second chance to prove her candidature? I'd like you to answer this candidly, because do people normally get second chances in interviews that they blow up?
I didn't ask in this case. I thought about it. I just felt that if in this, and since it's a specific question, I felt like I would be intervening unfairly to the interviewer or the person who was supposed to make a selection. Her feedback was very candid. In fact, she almost seemed a bit let down and pissed off. So I felt like it wouldn't be fair for me to push her. I think people have to be empowered to take decisions. So there was a different point there. I do think people can be given a second chance. And I know of people who have been given a second chance and they've done well. But I wasn't confident in this case. I didn't know what happened and I didn't want to get into it. And maybe we'll come back to it after some time has passed and both parties have had a chance to reconsider. But I just did. It's never right to force things when things haven't worked out. It's okay. There are many jobs out there. We'll find more people. This candidate will find another job. It's unfortunate. It didn't work out. I mean, that's how life is, right? You don't often get a chance to repeat exams, and it's a little bit like that. And I'm not trying to be tough about this. I just think in that context, I just felt it was not appropriate for me to push the case. I had already pushed a little bit by saying, hey, what happened? This was a good person. I thought this would work out.
Okay, we have a question here from someone who says, how about when you're interviewing for leadership positions? What are the key areas you need to focus on? And I'll add to this question about if you're, okay, maybe you should take this one first and then I'll take the second one.
You know my views on leadership, Seema, and this is what we teach at the AMP program at HSOL. Our whole accelerated management program is built around this leadership triad of can you deliver output and performance? while doing that, can you also positively impact people? And third, are you capable of changing yourself? I think that's the most authentic model that I follow of leadership for myself and what I look for in others. So again, interweaving in the questions that I just already talked about, whether it's competencies of the interesting and interested, or whether it is the questions that I asked, what I'm looking for is, what has this person really done? What have they delivered? What was the output? Now, you can again ask me the question, hey, if you never worked, how do you show it? And my classic example is people say, oh, I was a member of the Dramatic Society. Well, if you put that on your resume, what did you do in the Dramatic Society that was different from other people? If you were the president of the Dramatic Society, what happened that year in the Dramatic Society that was your individual contribution that was different from every year before? What value did you bring to the football team or to the student gymkhana that you were a member of? So I do think that looking at the impact, the results, the output that you created is important. And in doing that, then I like to assess. So describe to me a situation where one of your team members was underperforming, or a colleague in your group was not delivering. How did you deal with that situation? Gives you a clue as to how people deal with people, especially when the chips are down. You can equally present situations to say, hey, if somebody in your team is really smarter than you, and you know that, how do you get them to stay motivated? What do you do to encourage them? How do you deal with your own insecurity? So I think you ask questions about the people side, and then question how do you dealt with failure, how you've grown from your mistakes, how you deal with setbacks, gets to the question around, how focused are you on your self-leadership. So for leadership questions, those are the three areas which I follow, which is again back to the leadership model that we teach at the Accelerated Management Program. And, as you notice, these questions intersect a lot with what I talked about earlier.
Okay, I'll take this one more question from someone here who wants to know, how do you prepare for an interview for a generalist role? And if the interview offers a job title lower than your current title, but with a higher salary, how do you respond?
Well, the generalist role point, I think I've answered, Seema. I mean, between my point about interesting and interested and breaking down interesting into the 4 buckets, my 7 questions, my answer about leadership questions. I mean, those are the questions you need answers to. Obviously, you need an answer to, okay, so since you were a sales guy, how do you think now you'll be a generalist or a general management person? And I think the only way to answer that question is, again, to give examples of saying that, hey, you can actually translate the sales experience into general problem solving, communication, collaboration skills. So I think I've answered that question in good measure.
Lower job title, higher salary. What do you do?
I think you have to take an assessment in that situation of where will you be 5 years out, 10 years out. Too many people take a decision based on what's happening in the next role or the next job. And what they don't realize is that even if they be making lower money or getting a lower title, if that job accelerates their trajectory, it does mean that you'll take a dip in the near term, but that over a period of time, things will accelerate much more than the curve you are on right now, will actually give you the right answer to this question. Especially if you have this situation where one is better than the other, and it could be reversed, right? You could be getting a bigger title, but a lower salary. And I know it is difficult, but you're obviously considering that job because you want to shift, you want to change, you want to pivot. So the question to ask is, over a period of time, will this mean that I would be on a faster track on a steeper curve than I would have been otherwise, then your purpose is served. Then it doesn't matter if you're getting paid less in the near term or have a lower title in the near term. Long term, you'll be fine.
Okay, we have a question that's coming from the LinkedIn Live. This is Vaishakhi. She wants to know, how do you tackle the question, tell us about your weakness?
By answering it. I think the obvious intent of that question is not to find out about your weaknesses to reject you. I think when people ask that question, they know that you have some weaknesses. They know that you are not perfect. They themselves know that they are not perfect. But they want to know whether you are the kind of person who is reflective enough, who's committed enough to your own growth and development, that you are able to look at yourself and not take yourself too seriously and say, hey, yeah, these are things I need to work on. I think all of us have things to work on. And if you don't know what they are, then you should ask around. You should ask people who worked with you to give you ideas on what you might say are areas for you to work on. And these don't have to be gaps or deficits. These could be new things that you want to learn. So that's how I would think about it. I would think about it very positively. And by the way, if you answer this question really well, you got the job. Think about that. Most people are not able to answer this question well. It's anyway good for you to know what are the 3 things you should be working on at any time. I know, for example, that my big challenge is that I talk too much. I could have probably made this point in 2 minutes, and I take 5 minutes, and Seema is yearning to ask the next question, and she's going, will Pramath ever stop? I know that about myself, that I talk too much, and I have to work on it. I'm happy to tell people that. It's okay. Nobody's going to reject me and not invite me back because I talk too much. So I think you have to have the confidence to say, let's be reflective. Let's come up with examples. Let's not be gimmicky either. Let's not make up weaknesses. People say, oh, I work myself too hard. Or, I'm so, there are some common ones, right, Seema, that, I'm impatient because I love perfection.
Yeah, and don't try to make a strength sound like a weakness,
Yes.
That never works. So I think those are some common things that people do. They say they say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, and I think that's a weakness. I don't think anyone really buys into that. So it's a little bit of introspection, and you really need to know. And also, when you're talking about your weakness, it's always a good idea to say, what are you doing about it? If you've identified it as a weakness, have you also identified any steps on what you can do better?
Yes, I think being able to say that you're working on it, these are the specific steps you're taking, that you've made progress on it, but not enough, also adds to the authenticity of that example.
So we have a question here from Sunny again, and wants to know, how can we assess ourselves after an interview, whether it was a success or a failure, before the result was shared? I mean, I'm not really sure how you can, so you probably will have to wear.
Listen, if the interview was cut short,
it's not gone well.
Probably that not gone well. In exceptional circumstances, you wowed them so much that they didn't think they needed to ask you any more questions. They said, don't waste my time. I'll go on to the next guy. You are hired. But you won't know. And I know that people go through really tough interviews and they come out bruised and they feel, oh my God, I'm never going to make it. And then they get a call. So it's tough to predict. It really depends on the style of the interviewer. Sometimes you'll have very tough interviewers who are tough on you and make you feel bruised and unhappy, and you think you never will get the job, and you still get the job. And there are other people who are very amiable, very nice, but at the back of their mind, they're just nice to everyone. They're very hard-nosed. They are taking they are in between the smiles, really assessing you and deciding that no, that you're not fit enough. So it's best not to second guess. Best just to wait for the result.
Yeah, and
You just agonize and lose sleep.
Yeah. Stress for the time till it's not coming. Maybe another more important question is to say, if you don't hear back, what is the right time to wait till you sort of go back to the recruiter and say, are you ready with the result, or when can I expect to hear from you? What's the right gap, Pramath? 2 days, 5 days, 10 days?
If you're not heard back, to ask.
Yes.
I think 48 hours, if you've not been told that it's going to be longer.
Okay, so you're saying after 48 hours, if you don't hear back, then maybe it's a good idea to drop an email or just check.
Just to say, listen, I just wanted to check in and see if when I should expect to hear back. I think it's okay to ask that.
There's a question from Srila Saran, and she says she's looking to pitch to a prospective client, and that's why it's asking this question. Is there any association with work towards social causes or role as an educator while taken as a positive, or does it make her look not so serious about her own professional achievements?
Well, again, it depends on the context and the person. I would value that, because I would say that this person has a diversity of perspectives. The person has a courage to take not the beaten path, but to do things outside the box, that they would have a richer background, which would help solve whatever problem that she's going to solve for me. I do think others would also look that. I mean, from a point of view of selection, that makes you more interesting, right? In the framework that I started this whole webinar with. But yes, you also need to a little bit make that connection that you did. Why did you do it? Are you just try? Sometimes what happens is people do association outside of work, but it's because they are trying to, they're trying to use it to fill a gap or make more of it than it actually is. It's just volunteer work. And it's par for the course, and it's not something that is new or distinctive, then obviously it doesn't help. So I think you have to make a case for it that is genuine and compelling. I'll give you an example. When we interview students for some of the educational programs, people will say, oh, I was educating poor children in my neighborhood. And they would come every weekend to my terrace and I would educate them. And, it sounds nice, but at the end of the day, every second student claims that. And so you very quickly not qualifying that by saying that, listen, this was different from what everybody else does, that you didn't have 2 students, but you actually trained over 100 students over time, or that several of those students, thanks to your efforts, went into top colleges. Something that actually makes it more authentic and worthwhile does make a difference. And I would value that over somebody who didn't have that. But you have to make a case for it like everything else and make it sound authentic and substantial.
This is an interesting one. Someone wants to know, should I seek a salary hike when I am transitioning from one industry to another? Industry, I'm not sure, but if you're transitioning from one type of career to another, oftentimes, the pivot plus a salary hike is not always possible. Pramath, any opinion on this one?
No, I think in general, that's what I would also say, that, to make an industry shift and to be demanding a lot of money seems like you're asking for too much, because normally, I guess implicit in your question is the assumption that because you're shifting industries, people would want to test you and not pay you more, but unless you prove yourself. So yes, normally I would value the shift much more than the salary. And if somebody didn't pay you enough, but at least I mean, in a question, the assumption is that they're at least matching your salary, which is great. A matching salary when you really want to make a change or get out of a job is a good thing. And like I said, the first job, the first salary, the first position doesn't matter. The truth is, you have to understand, is this going to put you on a new trajectory, a different trajectory, in which case the cumulative compounding effect of shifting trajectories will far, far outweigh any dip or change or lack of growth in the near term.
Okay, we'll take one last question, and this is Alok, a student of yours and mine at some point. Alok wants to know, what are some of the foundational skills that one should highlight that indicate your ability to gain expertise irrespective of previous sectoral experience?
The ability to learn how to learn, Alok. And I think the fact that, for example, I don't remember what you did before the Young India Fellowship, but maybe you were an engineer like many people.
He was at ISTP.
Right. No, but he was also at YIF before that.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, listen, the fact that you've actually switched disciplines, that you've learned new things in the past, shows that you, one, have a growth mindset, that you have an ability to learn new things, and you are curious, you make an effort, you overcome the lack of prior expertise. I think you just have to give people assurance that you're able to learn new things in new fields by looking back on what you have done yourself, whether in your studies, whether in your research, whether in your jobs. And that will give. Now, what are the skills? I think the skills are the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, the ability to have resilience, the ability to try out new things, the ability to learn from others, the ability to put in the extra effort up front whenever you are making a shift like that. All of those are things that are foundational. Of course, if you're asking at a different level, the same foundational skills that again started this talk with, of problem solving, communication, collaboration, and personal impact, as well as personal values, growth, personal leadership, is what will give people the confidence that you have the skills regardless of where you are working.
Okay, I think we're almost at time. Pramath, just wanted to let everyone know, in case you're interested in knowing more about the EMP, we have a batch starting very, very soon. Please do reach out, write to us, reach out on our website, and I'm sure there's much more of this interesting sort of learning at the course, and we'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much, Pramath, for this. If you have any other questions, please look out. We have one more webinar coming up next week, but happy to take any questions and see if we can answer. So thank you so much, everyone, and good night. We'll
thank you, Seema. Thank you for inviting me. And as we assemble our third cohort, I'll encourage everyone to apply or consider applying if you are. And if not, please recommend the program to friends and people you know who might benefit from it.